Hello, SpongicX here, and during Christmas 2022, I was surprised with a copy of Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, the sequel to the surprisingly decent crossover game Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle for Nintendo Switch. I did enjoy the original game, but I thought the game got very repetitive and frustrating with its constant reliance on push block puzzles and very unfair fights and all that. And so the sequel still has some of these elements in there, but much less of them scattered throughout. And the puzzles in this were more fun, less frequent, and less frustrating. The combat, on the other hand, while it is overall the same thing as the first, it still has a lot of decent improvements, like actually being able to run around the arena. You actually get to control your characters this time. However, once you use the character's main weapon during their turn, they aren't allowed to move around anymore. So you got to make sure you control your character into the position you want them to be in before you attack, and you can't control them until after the enemy's next turn. So we get the ability to pick up explosives like bombs and throw them at enemies without them taking up a turn necessarily, and we get an ability to hover through the air a bit, so it's a nice little improvement over the original team jump ability from the previous game. We also get actual camera controls that we can rotate around the arenas and all that, and even in the overworld itself. And I really like that because I hated how far zoomed out the camera was in the original. I kind of wish you could get like closer looks at both the characters and the enemies you're fighting. And so give like by default the camera zoomed out, but now you can actually zoom in and rotate the camera around to get some really cool cinematic looking angles during the fights and even the overworld exploration. So yeah, that was a really nice addition. I'm glad they gave that as an option. So well, the combat is overall the same as before. There are some differences and improvements. Whether it was changing the weapons and abilities up for the characters or adding new equipable power ups called Sparks, which are hybrids of the Rabbids and Lumas from Mario Galaxy. So throughout the game, there are roughly less than 30 of these sparks you have to collect. Most of them, mostly they're from completing story missions or side missions. You start out only being able to equip one spark per character, but eventually you earn the privilege to equip two sparks at once. The sparks have many abilities, ranging from surging your character's weapons to gain elemental powers, which can be used against certain enemies. Some of them can also create earthquakes, give you enhancements for your slide dash, give you healing or cooldown abilities, and more. So my favorite sparks were the ones that let players summon enemy Rabbids as allies to assist you in battle. Those were some of the more harder ones to get. You could only get them by throughout the game. They're like these little medallions you got to collect. Like each world has their own set of medallions, and you can exchange them into a shop for a special gateway key. And if you find the hidden gateways, you can use the key to open a portal. Which, like the first one was like an enemy gauntlet, and then the other ones are mostly puzzle solving. But it's like once you beat those puzzles, you're rewarded with a special sparks, and some of them are ones that allow you to summon enemy Rabbids as allies to assist you in battle, and they work great for both offense and defensive maneuvers. There's even a hidden spark that lets you summon Rabbid Kong from the first game to assist you in battle, but it's really underwhelming. It just shows a brief cutscene of a close-up of Rabbid Kong's face, then it lazily just cuts to an earthquake occurring to blow enemies away, and they got really lazy there. It would have made more sense for it to show like a cutscene of him like jumping in the air and pounding into the ground, and then you actually see him like pounding the ground in gameplay, causing the enemies to fly away. Now that would have been cool, but no, we don't actually see Rabbid Kong appear. It just randomly, it feels like a cutaway, like a Family Guy cutaway. It just cuts to a close up of the character's face, and then it cuts back to reality. It's so weird. Yeah, that was a pretty lazy way of handling that. It was a cool idea, but poorly executed. So upon defeating enemies, you can earn star bits like the ones you collected in Mario Galaxy, which you can use to feed your sparks to level them up and strengthen the effects and power of their abilities. However, the Lumas only have a max level of 5, so you're most likely going to have all of them max leveled before you even reach the final battle. That's quite unfortunate. I hate how limited leveling things up are in these games, and I wish they'd be a little more flexible. it would add a lot of replay value. But the sparks were a fun addition to the gameplay. There are even some that are exclusive to the overworld, meaning you can't use them in battle, but they do give you abilities that are needed to progress to later points in the game. So these sparks supply their powers to your robot friend Beepo, who uses their powers to help traverse through the overworld obstacles. The first power up you get allows you to shoot these purple sonic blasts that can trigger stones and blocks to move, opening pathways or being used to solve certain puzzles. And they can even destroy certain cracked objects, like cracks on a wall. And so it's fun to just go around and blast everything with it to see if it'll cause a reaction. The second power up lets you find hidden items and hidden bridges by scanning for them. And the third power up upgrades your first power up to where you can now rapidly shoot out the sonic blast, and doing it on certain items can cause like plant life to grow faster, or it can even kill off these pesky thorns that are blocking your path. And it was a neat addition. It was so much better than the original game, where all of a sudden you get an ability where a hand can push these puzzle blocks out of the way, and it's like that's all you did throughout the overworld, just keep pushing blocks, and it was so boring. And I mean, there are still some block puzzles in this game, but they're less time consuming, and some of them were more fun puzzles to solve. I did enjoy them a lot better this time. I remember like just groaning every time I saw them in the original. And this one I was more like, oh, let's see, a new puzzle. Let's see how to solve it. I was actually excited to solve puzzles this time, and that's very I usually hate puzzle solving in games. Like, I love like the combat in Zelda games, but then when it comes to solving the dungeon puzzles, it just becomes a complete halt for me. So yeah, the fact that I was actually playing a game where I could say the puzzles were a fun addition, that's pretty rare for me to say. They even added items you can collect from winning battles. I don't even think there were items in the first game. And so the fact they actually added some that you can, however, you have to choose between, usually like every battle, in every battle when it's your turn, you get like ability points. You only get to use up 2 ability points per turn. And so every skill you use in that pretty much uses an ability point. So you can either use those 2 points to use 2 different attacks, use one to use an item, and use the other to use an attack, or, there's many ways to mix it up. Use stat abilities or attack abilities or items, and so you got to choose how to use your AP wisely during these battles. And so, yeah, you can purchase these items in the game using in-game coins. So, no microtransactions, thank God. So, you just collect like the little Mario coins in the overworld, or sometimes you're even rewarded with some for completing battles, usually up to 35. And so, these items range from like healing mushrooms, POW blocks that you can throw at enemies, cooldown restoration, mobility extensions, multiple dash attacks, and status effect healing items. Unlike the first game, the coins aren't used to buy new weapons anymore. Instead, they're used exclusively on the battle items, and you can also exchange 250 coins to heal your party. That's the way you can heal yourself. So, coins are very easy to earn in this game, and there's a lot of enemies that can keep respawning throughout the game, giving you plenty of time to keep, like, if you're low on coins for any reason, just go back and keep fighting enemies. And I had no money issues with this game. I used my, I earned a lot of coins throughout the game, and I spent them wisely, and I at least made sure to have at least, like, 20 healing items in my party at a time, so it's like, after a certain number of battles, when I come across a store, I make sure to replenish to the point where I at least had 20 healing items, 20 attack items, so I managed my money pretty well in this game, and never came to a point where I was running low on coins and was struggling to get more. So yeah, I managed to buy a lot of healing items, which I barely had to use at all until like the final world and final battle. That's where I definitely need to start using them. But I kind of hated the overworld gameplay in the first game. I hated the lack of camera controls. I hated how misleading it was that you don't actually get to control the characters themselves. Instead, you controlled the little robot character Beepo as the other characters followed him. I don't know why they did that, and for a game called Mario plus Rabbids, it's strange how you didn't actually control them. And I hated all the stupid block and switch puzzles you had to do throughout the game. The game was just littered with them in every level, each one worse than the last. And so I liked how in Sparks of Hope, you actually got to control the characters this time, and you even got to choose who you wanted to play as. Whoever was first in your party is the character you took control of. And Of course, all the characters play exactly the same as each other in the overworld, at least. Like, they all have the same speed, none of them have unique abilities. But it's still nice to get to choose who you want to play as. It gives you some more customization. So throughout most of the game, I ended up controlling Bowser as my leader, with Peach and Rabbid Peach as my partners. So at first, you start off with basically one playable character that you control with a party member who follows them. But over the course of the game, you eventually gain the ability to gain another party member. And during some of the big boss fights and the final boss and all that, you have a party of four this time. And so you only get to use like the fourth party member during these big boss fights, though. Usually during sections where they introduce a new playable character. So basically, the final bosses of each world. I like how most missions don't force you to have to use certain characters in a party. I mean, we've all played games where you're so used to playing as a certain character, then during a certain story point, like the characters get separated and you're forced to play as the characters you hate playing as the most. And there are rarely any issues where that has to happen. The only exception being the final battle, where that's one that changes the rules. Where you instead of playing as like 3 to 4 party members, you play as all of your party members at once. It takes turns to where you control like 3 of them at once, and that was a fun challenge. I really did enjoy the gameplay of the final battle, but so otherwise, for the most part, this game gives players the freedom to choose their preferred party, and it rarely has chances where you have to swap characters out. There are some side missions that do require you to have to play as 2 predetermined characters. Like I said, they're side challenges, so you don't have to complete them, but if you want to get everything in the game, you're going to have to complete them. But even then, they're not that bad. So for playable characters, we start off with Mario and Rabbid Peach, and then we also get Peach, Rabbid Mario, Rabbid Luigi, and Luigi. But down the line, we unlock more characters, including a new Rabbid character named Edge, a Rabbid Rosalina, and Bowser as the final character. The roster was pretty underwhelming this time around. I mean, the first one wasn't anything great, but I mean, usually in sequels, you're used to seeing them expand on a roster, and this one, it feels like they got rid of 2 characters and just added in one. They replaced one with 2 other characters and just added 1 new character to the mix, and it's not very exciting. So they got rid of Yoshi and Rabbid Yoshi, and darn it, those are some of my favorite characters in Mario plus Rabbids 1, so I really hate how they're not in here. That really sucks. I mean, they don't even appear in the game, not even as background characters, and not even referred to. It really sucks. So yeah, in exchange, we just get 1 new Mario character, 1 Rabbid character, and basically a Rabbid character that no one even asked for, one who isn't even based on a pre-existing Mario character. So yeah, Rabbid Rosalina basically takes over for Rabbid Yoshi, since she has a machine gun very similar to what his former weapon was. But Bowser technically takes over for Yoshi, I guess, because he kind of has like a ground pound attack that acts as like an earthquake attack to blow away surrounding enemies. So Mario fights with 2 sci-fi pistols that can be used to fire 2 shots at an enemy for double the damage, or you can split the shots to fire at 2 separate enemies. It'll halven the damage on each of them, but it's still a cool strategy, either using double the damage at one enemy or splitting the attack to attack 2 different enemies. It's a cool idea. As a special ability, both Mario and Luigi share the same abilities, where they can shoot at an enemy that they basically have like a counterattack kind of thing, where any enemy that takes like a step near their surrounding area will cause Mario or Luigi to shoot at them. So even if their turn is over. Mario's overall a decent character. I used him a lot early on in the game until I got Rabbid Rosalina added to the party. Then I kind of swapped him out for her. So Luigi is practically a clone of Mario's moveset, except he fires with a bow and arrow. So unlike Mario's pistols, he can't shoot 2 enemies at once. But Luigi's attack power is a little more powerful, and he definitely has better range than Mario. But I found myself using Mario more than Luigi. Rabbid Peach is once again the healer of the party, and for that reason alone, I used her as much as I could, because I love being able to heal like when characters are weak, and so yeah, she's good to have around for those reasons alone. And she's able to heal multiple at once, compared to just using the healing items, which can only heal 1 character at a time. So she has a gun that can shoot 3 homing missiles at enemies, tripling her attack power, basically. So otherwise, she's not good for taking out multiple enemies at once, like Mario can. But she might come in handy for like pesky projectile shooting enemies that love to hide behind coverage and all that from a lengthy distance, especially. So yeah, Rabbid Peach is a very reliable partner. Princess Peach is another character I like to have handy in the party. She is the only defender on the team, allowing her to protect the party for up to 2 attacks during one turn. And so her main weapon is an umbrella with a cannon scope on the top, allowing her to shoot over some protective covers to get a better attack range on certain enemies. So she can basically shoot out a trail of enemies standing in a line. And she does. There are certain areas that her weapon can't quite reach, though. But otherwise, she's a very useful party member, both for her defense and attack power. Rabbid Mario was one of my least favorite characters to play as. I'll say he is probably the character I played as the least, in fact. He did come in handy during some battles, but Rabbid Mario relies entirely on close combat, and it feels kind of useless since most of these battles require you to have to take cover while taking out enemies from a distance at the same time. And since his attack has such short range, it does not make him very good for both defense and attack. So, Rabbid Mario fights with gigantic robotic fists that can multi-punch enemies standing close to each other, and I mean, his attack power is really good, though, but there's barely any cases where you can even get close to enemies without it feeling like suicide, because getting close to enemies really leaves you open to getting ganged and attacked by other enemies during the next turn. So, he also has a counter attack for enemies that attack him with a weapon. So, however, it's only good for countering himself. You can't he can't use it to protect others, only himself. So yeah, it only works when enemies are attacking him. Rabbid Luigi was kind of cool at first until you see how bad his attack range is. I mean, he has an attack that can he has a frisbee that can bounce off one enemy and bounce into 2 others, allowing him to attack 3 enemies at once if you're lucky. But he also has a useful ability to half the enemy's attacks during their next turn, and if it wasn't for his bad attack range, I probably would have used him more. So next to Rabbid Mario, Edge, the new Rabbid character, was one of my least favorite party members. I didn't play as her unless the game required me to, and she's basically another close combat fighter, but she can throw her sword to attack like a boomerang at enemies. So basically, she feels like basically a replacement for Donkey Kong's boomerang banana that he had in the DK DLC from the first Mario plus Rabbids. She also has an ability where she can double her attack power on nearby enemies during her during that turn. So, but otherwise, yeah, I found her pretty forgettable for the most part. I barely used her. Rabbid Rosalina attacks with a Luma plush that has a machine gun in it, and it fires star bits. And she also has a useful ability at nullify surrounding enemies, leaving them frozen and unable to attack until someone attacks them or until a certain number of turns go by. So for that alone, she was very useful in missions where instead of fighting off enemies, it was more of a race to the finish while avoiding the enemies. And so that came in handy for where if you're surrounded by enemies, instead of trying to fight them all up, just nullify them so you have enough time to get away from them to where they can't hurt you anymore. So yeah, she was a very strategic kind of character, and I liked using her, but once I got Bowser, I pretty much stopped using Rabbid Rosalina all of a sudden, but now, Bowser is the last and arguably the best character to have in your party. He is just such a powerhouse. He has like a bazooka that can blow out many enemies in one shot, and he can even like take out their cover or greatly damage it at least. He also gets these explosive Mecha Koopas that can home in on enemies and blow up on them, and great for defense and decoys. So Bowser gets some interesting upgrades in the skill tree, including the ability to blow up the coverage automatically. But I ended up shutting that one off since it basically risks putting your own coverage to get blown up as well. And you don't want, in a game where you gotta take coverage as much as you can, you don't want to blow up your own coverage. So yeah, I shut off like the ability to destroy the coverage in one hit. That just really ruined a lot of strategies I had. But the Mecha Koopas also get an upgrade that add a burning status effect to their explosions. So that can be very useful for if you have like enemies who keep hiding in coverage, and so you send the little bombs on them to, once they catch on fire, it will cause them to run around and leave them exposed. So yeah, that's a great strategy too. It can backfire, though. Maybe you didn't want the enemies to run from their current position. So it's a gamble either way, but a cool ability regardless. So there are technically 6 worlds to explore in this game, but more like 5 actually, because the final world, the 6th world, is actually temporary. It's basically just an entrance to the final battle. It's a final boss gauntlet basically. And by gauntlet, I don't mean you have to fight pre-existing bosses. I mean it's a tournament of bosses with multiple phases. So it's barely a level. You barely control your characters there, but you basically fight 2 bosses, and then there's a multi-phase final boss, and that's it. Once you beat the game, the 6th world is gone. You can't even revisit it, or... Yeah, this game does not have very good replay value. It doesn't even give you a way to revisit any of the boss fights, and I'm hoping some of the DLC updates will make that an option, but it really should have been the game to begin with. So the game's worlds are basically different planets. You don't have a hub world in this game. In the first game, you had Peach's castle, and you could use like the time traveling washing machine to warp between levels. You don't have that in this game, unfortunately. Instead, your hub is replaced with a spaceship. You just go to the spaceship, and it gives you a little map select where you can choose between the planets. And so, yeah, I don't know. So it feels like this game is trying to take a lot of inspiration from Mario Galaxy with like the planet travel. I don't feel like it did a very good job at fitting it into the game. It feels very shoehorned, unlike the way Mario Galaxy presented it to its story. But it really doesn't feel much like we're traveling to different planets. It just feels like we're traveling to different levels that have like a theme of different seasons. So, like, the first world feels like a summer-based level. It's a beach level that has been shrouded in darkness and rain, and it's up to Mario and pals to bring back the sunlight and making it feel more like a summer setting. So, yeah, it's one of those games where the levels start out gloomy, but once you beat them, the levels are more pleasant to visit. And the second world is a winter-themed world. Wow, just like in the first Mario plus Rabbids game. But it's even colder than it should be. Wow, just like that one snow level from Mario Odyssey. So, yeah, they got kind of lazy with some of the levels in this game. Feels like they're just rehashing what other games did. And so, it's up to Mario and the gang to make it even less cold, but still cold enough to, they still need the level to be cold, but cold enough to fit the climate of that area, basically. So, the third world is a whimsical fall-themed level. It was a nice level. I did like that one. And the fourth world is, without a doubt, my favorite in the game. It's a very whimsical and colorful spring-themed level. You're just like on all these magical floating islands, and they have such colorful like scenery. I really love that one the most. And the only level that doesn't seem to have like a season theme to it is the fifth and final level, which is a steampunk level. It has like a giant garage, and you have like all these broken highways, all these junkyards, and it's a pretty ugly looking level. Just a muddy dystopian look, and it's painful to navigate with its maze-like setting. And now, the entrance of the final world has a bit of a twist to it, but it's mostly a small, dark, linear path that leads to 3 boss fights, and I'll get more on that later when I talk more about the story down the line. But so, while I did enjoy the game overall, I'd say the story and presentation was a lot weaker than the one from the first game. While the sequel does seem to have a few callbacks to the first game, including like unlockable items that retell the events of the first game in a story form, it tends to ignore a lot of the first game's continuity and doesn't answer any questions we might have had from the first game. Like, who was that girl from the opening cutscene in the first game? The one who created Beepo, along with the device that was responsible for creating Spawny? And, what was she trying to achieve in the first place? We never know. Like, the first game refused to go back to that, and this game acts like that never even happened, it seems like. And so yeah, before the Rabbids invade her lab and messed up everything for Mario's world and all that. And so, strangely enough, this game actually has some voice acting in it. Like, characters will actually speak sentences. Of course, none of the Mario characters really get any dialogue. They still, barely have anything to say. However, it's strange how, little secondary characters like Beepo from the first game, he used to make like cute little robot noises. Now all of a sudden he's talking like an annoying flamboyant British butler, and he now has like a sidekick named Jeannie. She's just like an AI intelligence that he's constantly arguing with. I don't know what the point of was with her, and I don't know why Beepo had such a drastic character change. Like, I thought he was a cute little character in the first one. I found him annoying in this one. Like, every time he talked, I actually skipped through his dialogue. I just was not in the mood of listening to his voice. But as if Beepo being able to talk was strange enough, here's something even stranger. Now the Rabbids can talk. They used to be known for making bumbling noises like bah, 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 bah. You know, they just made all these weird gibberish noises. Now all of a sudden they're speaking in sentences. They have like their own unique voices and tones, and it's so weird. I'd say I kind of preferred it when all of them just spoke gibberish. The only one I kind of liked having a voice was Rabbid Peach. I thought Rabbid Peach's voice really suited her, but Rabbid Mario sounded kind of like a stereotypical Russian, and I don't know, Rabbid Luigi sounded like he was trying to sound gangster. It was pretty meh overall. But yeah, I did like Rabbid Peach's voice. It did add some personality to that. You know, she is such a diva, and that new voice just adds to that. It just leaves a lot of questions, though. Since when are rabbits able to speak? The game doesn't even... Unless, like, it's somehow written all that diary stuff you can unlock throughout the game, which I honestly don't have any interest in, because this game has a lot of lore sprinkled throughout the levels, and it's honestly a snore fest every time, and none of it adds to the story whatsoever. None of it is interesting. I don't care about any of these new characters they introduce. They try acting like their stories are so deep and interesting, and I'm sorry, they're just boring. So it would have made more sense if the story at least established early on how the characters have spoken. Like it could have mentioned how after the events of the first game, you know, it's like the world is saved, but now the Mushroom Kingdom is littered with Rabbids, and so they could have at least explained how Peach opened up a school for the Rabbids, and some of them got educated, so that's how some of them are able to speak now. It's like they could have at least done that, but no. None of that is established in the opening cutscene. If there isn't even really an opening cutscene in this game, it just drops you straight into the gameplay, and the narrative there is really weak. There are still the traditional rabbits that still do the mumbling and blying. They're still like running around the backgrounds, causing mischief, and they still have like the little Easter eggs where you can find like the little animations of the rabbits doing stuff in the background, and that stuff was always kind of fun to seek out in the first game, and I'm glad to see they brought more of that into the new one. Without a doubt, both the story and setting of the first game was so much better. I can't say, like, the level exploration was as good, but the creativity behind them was definitely better, and it made more sense to the story that was being told, because, basically, the game starts off where a girl invented some headwear that can merge certain substances together. She appears to be a big fan of the Mario series, judging by all the toys and collectibles she had around her room, and as she leaves, the Rabbids just randomly burst into the scene with their time-traveling washing machine, as seen in previous Rabbid games, and they start messing with stuff until one of them messes with the headwear, and they start fusing the Rabbids with all the Mario merchandise, and then eventually it gets even crazier when the machine goes out of control, and it fuses with the Rabbid, creating him into the character known as Spawny, as Bowser Jr. named him, and so somehow it causes like them to malfunction the time-traveling washing machine. They somehow end up getting sent through a portal to Mario's world. Yeah, it's chaotic, but at least they tried making a chaotic story out of how the Rabbids ended up from here to Mario's world, where this new game doesn't even bother trying to be creative with its story. And basically the opening cutscene of that game established why the Rabbids and how Beepo ended up in the Mushroom Kingdom. And I loved the insanity of the first one, and it was fun to see the Rabbids constantly fusing with these Mario characters and villains. It was fun. You just never knew what was going to pop up unless you looked up spoilers ahead of time, I guess. But there's just something fun about seeing the Rabbids interacting with Mario objects and characters. And I feel like this sequel has even less of that stuff. There's barely any new Rabbid or Mario hybrids. The only one I can think of out of the top of my head is Rabbid Rosalina, and there aren't even enough like Mario characters in general. Like I remember how in the first game you at least saw more characters running around, whether it was the Goombas or the Toads, or in this you barely see any of them. So it was like, what was the point? This barely even feels like a crossover game anymore. It just takes the playable characters from the first one, but doesn't bother bringing any more in, which really sucks. So yeah, we don't even see any returning boss fight characters from the first game. So like Rabbid Kong technically appears, but only as a lazy attack summon. And so for those who liked Rabbid, Wario, and Waluigi and wanted to see more of them, sorry, they don't make a return here. And it's a shame we didn't get to see any new Mario and Rabbid hybrids, like Rabbid Daisy, Rabbid Birdo, Rabbid Professor Egad, more Kongs being turned into Rabbid forms, like Rabbid Diddy Kong, or we don't get any Rabbid Koopa Troopas, Rabbid Bloopers, Rabbid Cheep Cheeps. It's like, come on. There are some like new Rabbid enemies in this game, but they just feel lazily inspired. It's like, oh, just have a Rabbid wearing a helmet or a Rabbid wearing some kind of armor. It's like it's not as creative as the first game was. Yeah, I definitely thought the enemy variety of the first game was better. And then there are a few Mario enemies that are added as enemies this time around. Like, there were no basic Mario enemies in the first game, but this time you got like Goombas, Bob-ombs, and even Magic Koopas. Aside from that, that's not a whole lot. And most of the enemies here, while they do have redesigns, they mostly do act like clones of the same enemies from the first game. Just reskins, basically. Yeah, this game is trying to act like it has inspiration from Mario Galaxy, but with like the way you travel to different planets. But it doesn't really feel like we're traveling different planets. It just feels like we're traveling to different settings with different seasons on it. I don't feel like it gives you that good sense of space exploration like Mario Galaxy gave you. That being said, though, I do think the levels are more fun to explore this time around, what with having the rotatable cameras and all that, but there are some pesky little missions. There are some challenges where, like, this guy wants you to collect, like, these, what are called silly fish, and you gotta keep, like, chasing them, grabbing them, and throwing them into a fountain. So those missions got very repetitive, and the controls felt kind of unresponsive during those parts, but for the most part, the level exploration was fine. I just don't feel like this game took advantage of its space setting. It really felt shoehorned in. It doesn't feel like it fits this game well at all. It even, like, it's just incredibly forced. It's just not natural. Like, at least Mario Galaxy, like, it starts off as a normal Mario game, but it slowly introduces why Mario's all of a sudden in space. And it did it in a way where it makes sense for the Mario world. In this game, it's just like 1 minute Mario and Rabbids. Well, it's like 1 minute Mario and Rabbid Peach are in trouble with a giant space manta ray that appears out of nowhere, when all of a sudden Luigi and the other party members just show up with a spaceship, and they have Mario and Rabbid Peach hop aboard and fly off to save the universe. It just feels so forced and abrupt. The game's opening isn't any better. It's just it really felt rushed and lazy compared to the first game's chaotic opening. I mean, this game doesn't even have a proper opening cutscene. It just goes straight to like an in-gameplay scripted moment where you get like a panning shot of the Rabbids running around Peach's castle, and Peach approaches Mario and says, Rabbid Mario lost his overalls, help him find him. And yeah, that's how they open the game off. A Rabbid is missing his pants, and you gotta help him find it. And so Rabbid Mario's just hiding in a bush naked, apparently, and he won't come out until you find his overalls. So you just run around the castle yard, interacting with Rabbids and a few Toad NPCs until you finally find the overalls. And it's a shame that Peach's castle is only for that opening. Like, it was a beautiful location. Not much to do, but it was still some nice scenery. But once like the first like cutscene triggers in the game, you can't go back to this level ever, even after beating the game. And it's like nowhere on the level map. There's no like secret entrance to get back there. It sucks. Not to mention there isn't even a cutscene replay mode either. I could have sworn even the first game had a way to rewatch cutscenes, and this one has no way of letting you do that. It's a real shame. So suddenly a giant space manta ray appears out of nowhere. It takes Rabbid Peach, and Mario has to chase after her and get her back. And so we go through a tutorial section that teaches you how to play the combat. And eventually Mario saves Rabbid Peach, but they're both confronted by a giant new threat named Cursa. And yeah, I don't think any of us were fooled by what Ubisoft or Nintendo were trying to do here. I mean, I saw it, like, not only did I assume it right when I first saw her in the trailer, but I saw many others also predicting the identity of this villain, and so, yeah, no one was fooled by this big plot twist they were trying to build up, and let's face it, we all knew right away it was Rosalina. I mean, it's just so obvious. I mean, you got a game that takes heavy inspiration from Mario Galaxy, the game that introduced Rosalina. It has planet travel, Lumas that are fused with Rabbids, and even a Rabbid dressed like Rosalina, yet nowhere in sight did we see Rosalina. You think she would have been a playable character. I mean, you flat out have a Rabbid dressed as her, and all the Rabbids that were just like Mario characters in the first game that were playable were based on actual Mario characters you got to play as. But so we had Rabbid Rosalina, but no Rosalina in sight, and so it just gave everyone the assumption, okay, she must be possessed by the video game's new villain or something, and it's just it doesn't help that even the character kind of, the character, she has like a one eye exposed, and you just look at it, it's like, yeah, that looks like Rosalina's eye, just colored red. And so, to add to that twist, the final level where the final battle takes place, it turns out it was a corrupted version of Rosalina's Cosmic Observatory from Mario Galaxy. So I'll admit that was kind of a cool twist, though, because, yeah, the final battle just looks like a dark planet, but eventually you blast through, like, its core. Well, you blast through, like, its surface, and you see underneath it is Rosalina's observatory. It's like, okay, that was an interesting twist. Otherwise, no one was fooled by Rosalina being the villain or possessed by the villain. It's a shame that even after you save her in the end, you don't get her as a playable character. I mean, that was a real missed opportunity. Not even any of the DLC seems to hint that she'll be playable. Yeah, that sucks. So while most of the story is very forgettable, we do get some decent animation and some fun character moments. Most of the story is just the characters going planet to planet, meeting forgettable Rabbid characters that seem to be like the host or like chief or king of that planet, whatever, and you gotta try helping them, and there's a bunch of boring lore scattered throughout about like the backstories of these Rabbids, but I swear, none of these new characters are interesting as far as they try pushing them, and I'd say the only new characters I liked, aside from Rabbid Rosalina, was there's like in the second world there's this captain character who basically is kind of like a father figure to Rabbid Rosalina, and you could definitely see like a father-daughter relationship between them. So he was a sweet character. And then also in that same level, there was a boss named Midnight. She is like this this girl ghost rabbit. Yeah, she was interesting. She was a fun villain. And then in the fall setting level, there's this lumberjack rabbit who's in love with this little forest fairy rabbit. Her name was Dryad, and she was adorable. Seriously, she must be protected at all costs. She's just such a cute character. And so, despite how the game is trying to build her up to be a badass character, I found the character Edge to be a very forgettable and out-of-place character. Like, she added nothing to the game for me. To me, it's just another desperate attempt to try to make a cool, badass female character, but just coming more across as cringy than anything. Trying too hard, and it just gave me, like, Tana from Crash Bandicoot 4 vibes, or Viola from Bayonetta 3, yeah. I just found her very forgettable. Throughout the game, we see how Cursa has these three rabid henchwomen called the Spark Hunters, and all of them were forgettable except for Midnight, the ghost girl. Like, she was the only entertaining one. The other two were just very forgettable and boring. But so you can see how throughout the game, these huntresses seem to have history with Edge, and not big surprise, but down the line, we learn that Edge was one of them, and not only was she one of them, but she was apparently their leader, too, and eventually, she started realizing that what Cursa was doing was wrong, and so she turned a new leaf and vowed to protect the Sparks instead of hunt them down. And she'll even stop her old friends if she has to. So, yeah, the story of this game is very by the numbers. It's not very, despite how it tries having twists, it's very predictable. You can basically see like all this stuff coming from miles away, and nothing about it really stands out aside from the fact it's a silly game that crosses over two unlikely video game franchises, and neither of them fit into this kind of story they're telling. And so, overall, I did enjoy the gameplay, but this game is littered with problems throughout. While the game is well animated with zany movements and expressions and very colorful characters and settings, the game suffers from major performance issues, some of the worst I've seen on a Nintendo console for that matter. The frame rate is constantly lagging during cutscenes and gameplay, which is pretty sad when you realize you're playing a game where you're barely doing any movement. It's like most of the characters are standing around doing attacks throughout most of the turns, so how is this causing the game to lag so badly? You're on such blocky-looking terrain, too, so some of the worst performance issues are when you destroy, these things called the Dark Mist barriers. It's like when you destroy them, they create like a cloud of black smoke, and walking through that smoke as you destroy them really causes the frame rate to drop to like 5 frames per second. It is really bad. Luckily, this is a game that mostly relies on just turn-based combat. Like, if this was a platformer or a high-speed action game that required precise movement and reflexes, yeah, that would have been terrible. But because this is a more slower turn-based combat kind of game, it makes the frame dips a little more forgivable, but there's still no denying that I wish this game ran a lot smoother, and I wish the gameplay was faster at times, too. The characters move around very slowly, even in the overworld, and the game does offer you a way to speed up the attacks animations during your enemies attacking during their turns and all that, but it doesn't help out. It just doesn't help very much when you're in very outnumbered matches where it's like 4 against 15 enemies at once. So even when you're speeding through it, it still takes forever for the enemy's turns to finally get up. And another thing that bugs me about the game is the replay value. I mean, this is arguably a much lengthier game than the first one, which I thought the first game was way too short and just had no good replay value. And so, this game, it gives you plenty to do throughout the game. I mean, I was like completing all the side missions before making it my way to the final battle and all that. And so, I was able to get nearly everything done in this game. And so, it took me roughly 40 hours to beat this game altogether. And so, I was hoping that maybe after beating the game, there would be more to do, and no, there isn't. I was hoping, like, oh, maybe I'd go back and just level up my characters more, but, unfortunately, by the time I made it to Chapter 5 out of 6, I found out the max level is level 30, and I was already there, so... And it is recommended you are max level when you enter the final battle, because the boss level difficulty there is level 30. So, yeah, I hate it when RPGs are so limited with leveling up. I have the same problem with the Paper Mario games. I like it when games can let you, like, overpower your characters, like, where they're, like, level 99 or something. Kind of like in the Pokemon games. And, I mean, even when they're max level, they're still going to have trouble fighting certain battles, so... it's all about, like, weaknesses over strengths and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I just hated how short the max level was in this game. It's like, I wish there was more so it gave you a reason to want to go back and keep leveling it up. But nope, I can't. I'm max leveled on each character now. And so, yeah, I also have all the items bought, all the sparks found, and there's just nothing more to do with this game until the DLC comes out, I guess. But, I don't know. Despite how there are at least like 3 waves of DLC coming out down the line, I doubt they will be treated as expansions to this game. They'll be treated just like short little side stories, just like the underwhelming Donkey Kong DLC from the first Mario Plus Rabbids. And I really wish the Donkey Kong DLC was treated like an expansion to the first game instead of its own separate short game. It would have been nice to be able to carry your stats over, but now have a new character added to your deck with Donkey Kong and Cranky Kong, Rabbid Cranky Kong, but instead, it's like the only playable character added to that roster is Rabbid Peach, so all the other characters that you gotta play as are no longer there, and Rabbid Peach is back to like level 0, so you have to level her up all over again, along with the 2 extra characters, and it doesn't help that the game is it's just like the length of 1 chapter from the original game, so it's a very short DLC. Roughly just 3 hours long, but I felt very underwhelmed in the end of that, and so I feel like that's all this new DLC is going to be. It's just going to be more of the Donkey Kong stuff, and I mean, I wish I could be excited. Like, one of the last DLCs announced for this first wave is Rayman themed, and so it's great to see Rayman return to the franchise that basically replaced him, but at the cost of not letting it see Rayman cross over with Mario and pals. What's the point? Yeah, like, it's like, it sounds like a fun idea, but wasted when they already are saying Mario won't be interacting with Rayman in this. That sucks, really. What's the point? So, despite all of the game's flaws and all of my wishes on what should have been, I still enjoyed the game overall. I was smiling throughout most of the game's fun combat, exploring its colorful worlds, and listening to the beautiful and epic soundtrack by my favorite music composer in video gaming, Grant Kirkhope. Yes, the guy who did the music for Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, Yooka-Laylee, and Viva Pinata. He composed the music for this game, and it's one of his best works in my opinion. And I honestly didn't think the score from the first Mario Plus Rabbids game was that memorable. It was kind of bland and forgettable, with a few standout songs like Rabbid Kong's theme, along with the music during the Phantom of the Blopera. It's like, yeah, those were memorable scenes, but the rest of the game was just very filler. I don't know, very filler cookie cutter music, and so I felt like Kirkup really stepped up his game with the sequel. He made the music sound much more cinematic, and it really lends itself to not only the beautiful levels, but even some of the intense battles and boss fights. It's like hard to believe you're playing a Mario or Rabbids game with how cinematic the music sounds. And I really love the part in the snow world where you're sneaking through a snow castle. There's like a hedge maze, and during that area, it's like so cool how the music syncs with your character's footsteps and movement speed. And so, like, when you stop moving, the music just gets a little more ambient and suspenseful, and then it resumes like once you start moving again, and that was really cool. Like, I was just kind of like, at first, like when I was controlling my character there, I'm like, huh, it's weird how that music really fits the character's movement. And then I stopped moving the character, the music stopped. And then I started moving slowly again, and I heard the music picking up again. Then I moved faster, and the music was speeding up. All of a sudden, it's like, that is really cool. I mean, it's reasons like that for why I love Grant Kirkhop's music. He knows how to make video games so immersive, ever since, like, Banjo-Kazooie. So, yeah, overall, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, it's not a perfect game, but it's still a fun sequel and a fun game on its own, and I'd probably give it a 7.5 out of 10. I'd love to see more sequels to this, ones that have less restrictions, ones that let us level the characters up higher, and maybe even scrap the turn-based battles and settle for a real-time combat system that plays more like a third-person shooter slash platformer like Ratchet and Clank, maybe, but while still maintaining the RPG stats and elements and abilities. And I'd love to see a hybrid of that. Keep the RPG mechanics, but add more of a third-person shooter platformer hybrid to the mix. That'd be fun. I'd love to see more returning characters from the Mario universe, along with more rabid hybrids of the characters from the Mario universe. And I don't know, I'd even love to see more rabid plus crossovers with different characters. So, like, what if we got The Legend of Zelda plus Rabbids, Kirby plus Rabbids, Pokemon plus Rabbids, Sonic the Hedgehog plus Rabbids? You just name it. There's a lot of possibilities with this franchise. More Rabbid cosplays as, like, different characters from different franchises, while still having the RPG gameplay. Yeah, this could become a pretty fun franchise, but there's a lot of potential in this series, but I feel like there's a lot holding it back for now, with its limited gameplay options and performance issues. But I do want to see the series improve with more polish, and so, yeah, while it's not the perfect game, it's not the perfect game I want it to be, but I can still acknowledge that what this game got right, it got right, and it's still a fun time overall, even with its few frustrating or underwhelming moments. It's a great addition to the original Mario plus Rabbids game, and yeah, I recommend it. Well, that's all I have to show for now. Thank you for watching. See you next time, and have a great day.